Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're looking at a story that reads exactly like a tense political thriller, but it's entirely real, the Watergate Scandal. We're going to unpack a sequence of events so dramatic and so incredibly secretive that it permanently changed the fabric of the United States. Just imagine a conspiracy so deep that it reached the very highest levels of power, completely wrapped in mystery, hidden agendas, and honestly unbelievable truths. Let's get started.
Okay, let's dive into this. How on earth does a minor, kind of botched break-in end up bringing down the most powerful man in the free world? I mean, it sounds totally impossible, right? But as we go through this, you're going to see exactly how a single thread, once pulled, completely unraveled an entire administration.
To understand how it all fell apart, we have to go back to the inciting incident. Section 1. A seemingly ordinary burglary. So, the date is the night of June 17, 1972. The location is the Watergate office complex in Washington, D.C. At first glance, local police thought they were just dealing with a standard late-night robbery, but the details of this break-in immediately raised some major red flags. 5 men were caught breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters, and investigators quickly realized these guys were absolutely not after money. Their actual intent was to install listening devices and steal confidential political information. Why? Well, because these burglars had direct connections to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign. Nixon was running for a second term, and his team was desperate for absolutely any political advantage they could get over their opponents. That brings us to Section 2, uncovering the massive cover-up.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the tension began to escalate. What started as a localized break-in was about to spark a hidden conspiracy of massive proportions. Publicly, the White House maintained a stance of total denial. President Nixon claimed that neither he nor his administration had anything whatsoever to do with the break-in. And, well, it worked. Many Americans believed him, and later that year, Nixon won the presidential election by a huge margin. But behind the scenes, the investigative reality was very, very different. Slowly, evidence was emerging that the burglary was just one small part of a much larger, highly coordinated campaign of political spying and dirty tricks.
The reason that reality came to light was largely thanks to 2 relentless young reporters from the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. They absolutely refused to let the story die. They kept digging, following clues, and chasing down confidential sources. And they were secretly guided toward the truth by a highly placed, mysterious source who became famously known as Deep Throat.
As Woodward, Bernstein, and official investigators kept digging, they uncovered the shocking efforts being made to keep the truth hidden. I mean, we're talking about government officials actively destroying evidence. They were literally paying hush money to the burglars to buy their silence, and they were actively pressuring investigators to just stop looking into the case entirely. But the walls were closing in, which leads us to Section 3, the secret White House tapes.
The narrative shifts right here from a quiet cover-up to a highly public thriller. In 1973, the U.S. Senate launched public hearings, and millions of Americans were glued to their televisions watching former White House officials testify under oath. During these hearings, an unbelievable moment happened. A witness dropped an absolute bombshell. President Nixon had installed a secret tape recording system right inside the Oval Office. This system was set up to automatically record many of his conversations. Suddenly, everyone realized that the ultimate proof of what the president knew and when he knew it might actually exist on audio tape.
Naturally, this kicked off a massive legal battle. Special prosecutors and Congress immediately demanded that the White House hand over these recordings, but President Nixon flat out refused, claiming executive privilege. This standoff created a huge constitutional crisis that pushed the issue all the way to the highest court in the land, the United States Supreme Court.
Which brings us to the climax of our story today. Section 4. The Smoking Gun Revealed.
Let's move ahead and see how this builds, because this is where the undeniable evidence finally comes to light and changes history forever. In July of 1974, the Supreme Court made its decision, ruling unanimously that President Nixon had to hand over the tapes. He basically had no choice. When investigators finally listened to those recordings, they found exactly what they were looking for, the famous smoking gun recording. This specific tape proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Nixon had directly participated in efforts to block the FBI's investigation just days after the Watergate break-in. This undeniable evidence completely destroyed whatever political support Nixon had left.
So, the crucial point is, what happened next in the halls of power? Congress prepared to impeach the president on 3 massive charges: obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and contempt of Congress. The writing was on the wall, and the wheels of impeachment were rapidly turning.
Realizing that his impeachment and removal from office were now almost certain, Nixon made a historic decision. On August 8, 1974, he addressed the nation on television to announce he would resign. The very next day, August 9th, he officially stepped down, and Vice President Gerald Ford immediately became president. Just a month later, in September 1974, President Ford granted Nixon a full presidential pardon for any federal crimes he may have committed while in office. As historical records note, this decision to pardon Nixon was highly controversial and deeply divided the country.
1. The historical weight of this number literally cannot be overstated. Richard Nixon became the first, and to this day the only, U.S. president ever to resign from office. It was a totally unprecedented moment in American history.
Section 5. The legacy of Watergate.
And this brilliantly illustrates how a scandal that started with a simple break-in ended up permanently altering American politics. The scandal had massive, tangible outcomes. Because of Watergate, we saw the implementation of stricter campaign finance laws. We saw increased oversight of government officials to prevent this kind of abuse of power. It created a much stronger, celebrated role for investigative journalism. But it also left a lasting cultural mark. It led to a significantly increased skepticism among everyday Americans toward their political leaders. The trust was, for many, entirely broken.
More than 50 years later, Watergate remains a powerful reminder that no one is above the law. Which leaves us with a final question to think about. If no one, not even the President of the United States, is above the law, how vital is a free press in protecting our democracy today? It's a provocative thought, and one that